Hello, Inca. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my kitchen. It's summer right now, it's peak tomato season. So we got together to make a couple of tomato recipes and just have fun with tomatoes. And now we'll take you through how that experience went.
So we each picked a recipe. The one that I picked is a Neng-Myun dish from Jeju Noodle Bar. And the dish that Andrew made are these tomato fritters he once had in Santorini.
That's right. Fritters in general are something I love to eat in the summertime. Any fresh vegetable I think could become a delicious fritter.
You love your fritters.
Yeah, I've made it a lot on the channel actually. I've done the zucchini, I did the corn. I've actually never made tomato fritters, but it's something that I've had, so I wanted to take a crack at it because we had these excellent tomatoes. We also happened to be at Harry's Berry's farm for a visit, and they had the most delicious tomatoes I've had in a very long time. The tomatoes were practically sweeter than the strawberries. It was crazy.
The cherry tomatoes, oh my gosh.
These little yellow guys. Even though these tomatoes came from Oxnard, California, San Marzano are famous for coming from like volcanic soil in Italy. And since these tomato fritters are a traditional dish of the island of Santorini, which famously is the site of a giant volcanic eruption, I thought it'd be fun to use these San Marzano tomatoes. They're kind of like little plum-sized ones. Those were pretty ripe, but I took the remaining white core out of the center. And then I also ended up quartering these little cherry tomatoes, which were far sweeter in comparison. So it was just like having little different bites of tomato. And I also salted those tomatoes so that they could get a little bit of seasoning, and also some of their moisture could be drawn out and brought into the bowl. For the rest of the ingredients, we kept it pretty simple. Inca cut up some green onion, and we had some herbs, dill, and mint. I was definitely unsure of the proportion. I mean, it's the sort of recipe where some people are adding other herbs, oregano, maybe basil, other people are adding feta cheese, maybe they're not using green onion, they're using red onion, but it sort of doesn't matter. As long as there is a batter and there is the tomatoes, everything else is just there to accentuate.
I will say it looked very festive.
Then it was just putting some flour in until I thought it reached the right consistency. And this is always the question mark phase for me, because you don't want them to be too cake-like, right? I think ideally there would be no batter. You would just have fried tomatoes suspended in nothingness, but you need something to hold them together. I actually ended up thinking it was a little bit dry, so I had the tomato juice that had dripped out of my colander of tomatoes. I mixed that with some flour as well to create like a little bit of a slurry and added that back into it. I think in the perfect fritter, you want the tomato to remain a little bit juicy. It's not like with zucchini, for example, where you're really just trying to wring out all of the moisture you possibly can. You do kind of want this like suspended state of juicy chunk among crispiness everywhere else. But I like the consistency of the batter so that I'm basically like filling a large spoon, plopping it into the oil, and then spreading it out to the right thickness. I think that came out pretty well.
Came out really well.
Yeah, and after the first two, I did adjust. I added a little bit more flour. I also had some like potato starch hanging around. I added some of that, hopefully to make a more crispy outside as well.
I feel like the starch also gave it a bit more of a chew, which I really liked.
Yeah, what did you think?
I really liked it. I honestly didn't know what to expect because I was worried that the tomato would be so juicy that it'd be soggy, you know?
Right,
but then I feel like the way you were able to balance out the batter, you maintained that sort of crispiness on the outside, but inside you get that burst of, actually it was really hot that first bite you took, wasn't it? Like of the tomato, because it was just...
Yeah, it's just like hot tomato juice.
Oh, and the seasoning. I think when we were putting in all the herbs, I was like, oh wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I was like, I think this is too much. I think we cut up too much, but honestly, it could have used more.
Yeah.
And I think larger pieces of onion.
Oh yeah.
Because hot tomato is a very dominant flavor. Does that make sense? Like tomato, when it enters the like, oh, I'm about to become tomato sauce temperature range, it becomes very dominant. Surprisingly, actually. I didn't think it would necessarily taste that way. And you know, tomato is like described as an acidic thing, but I think it could have actually used like some lemon juice or something else to like lighten it.
Sean actually had a bite with lemon juice and his reaction was, whoa.
I think honestly, there could have been more batter and also thinner because they were pretty generously filled with tomato, if we're being honest. But that's always the balance.
I did want to ask if it tasted the way you remembered it to taste the first time you had it.
Like in Greece, yeah. I think so. I remember tasting it and being surprised because I think similar to your assumption, I always thought that like tomato is too wet to be in something crispy. I think I was pretty close. if I'm remembering.
Okay.
It's funny, we didn't plan this, but we both ended up making recipes we've never made before.
Yes.
Yeah. Mine was a recollection of a dish I had a long time ago, and yours, on the other hand, was what?
Mine was a dish that I haven't even had. So the dish we made is a tomato Neng-Myun from Jeju Noodle Bar, which is a seasonal menu dish.
Yeah.
I love everything from Jeju Noodle Bar,
yeah.
and I love the way they kind of do their own spin on traditional like Korean dishes.
Right.
So I saw this tomato Neng-Myun dish that they just came out with, and even from just the look of it, you can just see how many tomatoes they use in it. And I was like, wow, this dish seems like it really highlights the seasonal flavor of tomatoes right when it's like ripe and juicy and sweet. So I reached out to Chef Douglas and asked him if he could share his recipe of like how he made it and how he came up with it. And he was kind enough to send it to us. So we were able to attempt to recreate it in Andrew's kitchen. So to go into the recipe, there's 3 main components that make up this dish. One is the broth of the Neng-Myun dish. And then second would be the puree sauce that goes on top of the noodles. And third is garnishes. There's a lot of garnishes for this beautiful dish. Starting with the broth, which is to be served cold. So Chef Douglas actually chooses to use sun-dried tomatoes instead of fresh tomatoes. And his reasoning for that is because you know how like with dashi, you use like dried fish and it has more of that umami flavor? That's what he's attempting to do here. And so that's why he put for like sun-dried tomatoes and when you're in a restaurant, right? In the same pot, it's like sun-dried tomatoes, water, and they just throw in any sort of vegetable trimmings they have lying around. So in our case, I just asked you what you had in your fridge.
Yeah,
and
I had some red onion, I had like a wedge of cabbage, and some celery, so all of that went into our broth.
Yes, and then that's the broth that we just let it simmer for around like under an hour and then let it cool. And I actually did a version of this at home too because I just wanted to attempt to see if I could do it. And I actually let it steep in the fridge overnight. So
you brought it over in a wine bottle.
And I brought it over in a wine bottle because I do not live here and I did not have containers. And it actually looked really cool. Andrew drew it from a wine glass. You drank it from
I had a little sip. It was very good.
It was very good. Going into the spicy tomato puree that you serve with the noodles, this had like a bunch of different things. So we had Granny Smith apples in there, peeled.
White onion that we
washed well because you don't want it to be so like in your face. And then other aromatics like garlic.
Ginger.
Also had some sugar and of course gochugaru, which is the red pepper flakes. And then gochujang, which is red pepper paste. That's where the spiciness comes from. We also added in some mustard, and the mustard we used was not the traditional mustard that's served with Neng-Myun, which is more of like a yellowish.
Yeah, like a really horseradish type of mustard.
Yes, but we tasted it and felt like it went well with the other components, so that's the one. And then the most important thing are these pickled tomatoes that have been pickled with white balsamic vinegar.
Yes.
Yes.
I saw that white balsamic vinegar and I was like, I want to taste that. It was delicious. I could have had a glass of that on its own.
You were just drinking vinegar off to the side because we also added rice vinegar to the puree, and you were also
which was also tasty. Yeah.
For the white balsamic vinegar, I chose one that had more sugar content.
Yeah.
Because I wanted it to be sweeter. And I also asked Chef Douglas why he chose like white balsamic vinegar to marinate the tomatoes versus like rice vinegar, and he said it was because he comes from like a French culinary background, and I think he wanted that sort of like sweeter flavor to coat the tomato. So he was saying white balsamic vinegar or sherry vinegar, that can kind of enhance the flavor a little bit, which I thought was very interesting. So for the tomatoes, we actually blanched them first and then bathed them in ice water, peeled it, and decored it.
Decored it, yeah.
Decored it. And the thing is, we wanted to use the amazing Harry's Berries tomatoes, but they were so ripe and juicy that when we decored them, they basically just burst into pockets of tomato juice in our hands.
They basically instantly became crushed tomato.
Yes, which is a beautiful thing. Just did not look quite like the picture that Chef Douglas sent me of what they were supposed to look like.
But they was all gonna get blended together anyway.
Yeah, I did make some beforehand because I was worried this would happen. And you know what? We ended up having to use both anyways.
The Harry's Berries ones were so much more flavorful.
Yes.
It was like tomato juice.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it literally was tomato juice, but like it was like a drinkable tomato.
But that's it. That's like all of the stuff that goes into this puree, which we then blended together until it forms this like thickish paste. That was this like orangey red color.
It tasted a lot like cocktail sauce to me.
I don't know how I feel about that statement.
It was like spicy plus tomato.
But yes, I feel like it was less tangy and acidic than I expected it to be, which was pleasant in a way. So that was the puree.
It's so flavorful. I mean, there's like a dozen things in there.
Yes,
so good.
I think we like just talked about all the things we could dip in it.
It also reminded me of the romesco I made with Sean.
Nice.
So next was the noodles.
I bought these frozen Neng-Myun noodles.
Yeah.
Just pop them in there.
And they're made with buckwheat, is that right?
And they have this like slightly chewier texture.
Right.
And to help with that, actually, that's why I'm like rinsing them in water and like giving them like a little ice bath.
So then it was time to construct the bowl.
Yes.
So the noodles.
And then the broth, and then a generous spoonful of the spicy tomato puree.
Then there were some raw garnishes, which we had previously prepared. We had thinly sliced tomato.
We also had thinly sliced fennel, which
mandolined fennel.
I feel like that was the key thing that when I saw the picture, I was like, this is the thing that I have to recreate. Andrew did most of that because I was terrified. And then also radishes.
Yeah, also on the mandolin.
We also had basil leaves on it.
And then a little sprig from the top of the fennel. Also in the blender, we had a bunch of basil, olive oil. We then actually let that steep for a while and then strained it through a cheesecloth.
Oh yeah.
Until we just had this like green oil. Yeah.
Oh, and then of course, in the bowl too, we also put in some more cherry tomatoes and mini heirloom tomatoes.
Yeah.
Just like very like tricolor vibe. So when I was sourcing ingredients, I went to the farmer's market and I was just trying to find all the most like colorful ingredients because I feel like this dish is one that like you really want those colors to pop. I really liked how it came out. I felt like all the colors really came together.
Yeah, I feel like it matched the picture pretty much perfectly. Then it was time to eat it. So step one was mixing everything together, destroying that sculptural plate that we just made. And then snipping the noodles, which is the standard operation for Neng-Myun because that noodle is so chewy.
And so long. The broth is good on its own, but mixed with the puree, it just it's like the combination of those flavors together. We just could not stop like slurping.
Yeah, and it really does make sense to have the sun-dried tomato base broth, which is a little bit kind of like a darker, deeper tomato flavor.
Yeah.
And then this other garnish on top of the pureed pickled tomato and then the fresh bite of tomato. Because it's almost like if the tomato is great, you always want that fresh bite of tomato. So if you're making other stuff in the dish with tomato, what else are you gonna do to that tomato? You have to have a different tomato.
It was very good. Halfway through inhaling the bowl, I was like, I forgot the avocado. But I will take responsibility for this because Chef Douglas did tell me that the avocado was a key ingredient in this dish because it offers like a meatier bite.
We had the second half of our bowls with that avocado, which was
very delightful. It was very good.
It added a much needed like fat element that wasn't really present anywhere else in the bowl. The quick pickle of the tomato is interesting.
Oh yeah.
I think I might do that in the future. Or maybe you could use that as like a garnish to other tomato-based things. Like I'm thinking of making like a hot pasta, but then also finishing it at the last minute with a little bit of that quick pickle tomato.
Or even just as is. I felt like it was really good.
For
just
sure.
the balsamic vinegar and the tomatoes. I think for me, it was also the idea of like mixing a puree with a broth. Like it was just like very fresh, like the puree was like uncooked because it was not like cooked through a process so much that like you really get all those like fresh flavors through and you just mix it with a ready-made broth. That concept to me is not something that I feel like I've experimented with before.
Right.
And I feel like there's a lot of potential there that I'm very curious about.
So that's two ways we use tomatoes. It's kind of a spur of the moment thing. Got all these delicious tomatoes. We wanted to do something fun with it. And Inca was in town, so what better way to spend an afternoon than cooking some fun stuff?
As always, if you guys have a fun dish you've made recently with fresh tomatoes, let us know.
Or an all-time favorite dish with fresh tomatoes. We'd love to know about it.
Yes.
But otherwise, thanks for watching.
Bye. Bye.
And big thank you to Harry's Berries for sharing their tomatoes with us.
And also thank you to Jeju Noodle Bar. Thank you, Chef Douglas, for sharing his recipe with us. Literally could not have done this without him.